Right. We'll get started here. So if everyone can mute your mics, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. My name is Benjamin Horowitz. I am the FEI Long Island chapter president. Today we have a special guest on with us and sponsor of our chapter, Michael Dombrowski. Michael is the Infrastructure and Cyber Solutions National co-leader of BDO Digital. He has more than 25 years of experience in information security, application development, ERP, infrastructure, and complex program management. Michael has significant experience in both the public and private sector across numerous industries, including financial services, manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals. He's also experienced in IT strategy, IT optimization, cybersecurity, ERP implementation, IT cost reduction, IT organizational change, and ITIS risk management. So I'm going to kick it on over to Michael. Before I do, I just want to share with everyone, if anybody has any questions along the way, Michael has said, please feel free to interrupt him at any point in time if you want to ask anything. If you don't have to wait till the end, but we will have Q&A at the end of the session. And with that being said, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to kick it on over to you.
Great, thank you, Benji. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you for attending, and I am very honored to be able to sit here and speak to you today about a topic that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. I'll give you a little bit more about my background. It's just, there's a lot of things listed in what Benji just rattled off, which says that either I did a lot in a short amount of time, or I've survived for a long time in the IT and security industry. Which is more of the latter, right? So give you a sense of, how long I've been, involved with all of this. I remember formatting one of the first 10 megabyte hard drives, which took 3 days to format, right? And we were amazed at that. So I've been with BDO now. I'm in my 6th year, and I lead our national practice leader for our cybersecurity practice. But I also am part of the larger IT, we call it IT services group, which is the technology consulting. So I also oversee technology strategy, risk governance, third-party risk management, those types of things in IT. Before coming to BDO, I was at Citi for about 10 years, and I spent the majority of my time there in their information security program. In fact, I joined when they were first putting it in place to help them kind of really figure it out and then get it over the hump, because the regulators were actually demanding, that they take action across many, many different domains in there. I did spend a little bit of time in their anti-money laundering program as well, which I think you would find if that is very similar to cyber and security, and just in trying to detect bad things in good behavior, that kind of stuff. And then prior to that, I was with Deloitte Consulting and their IT consulting group. That was about 12 years. And then prior to that, I was in various industry roles, as you could tell by listening to what Benji said, doing different things, all technology related throughout my career. But the last probably 15 years, a lot of focus in the security area. So happy to be here today. And, we're going to go through a little bit of information. I'm sure you've had, you've joined presentations before, whether it's through here, this community, or other webinars and so forth. I'm sure this isn't the first time you're hearing information about cybersecurity and what's going on out there and the threats that are, currently happening. Which is why, please interrupt, please ask me any questions you want. Does not have to be on the topic of what we're going to talk about today, which is about how the, attacks are increasing, even though we're spending more money on security. I'm going to talk a little bit about, why, what's happening, and what are we doing about that, right? So, but if there's other things you want to talk about, feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand and just ask the question, right? So I want this to be as valuable a use of your time as possible walking away from it today. So if I can get my mouse over here, and we'll get going. We're actually going to start off with a little survey, just to kind of, we're going to have like 4 surveys throughout the day, really quick questions. Just want to kind of gauge, kind of where you are in understanding your security posture and so forth and so on, and relative to the topic today. So, Sarah, can you run it? I'll give everyone a few seconds here to kind of click. I want to close mine. And when done, Sarah, can we share the results? Okay. All right. Awesome. So the last one obviously is not a surprise, right? It's sometimes it's hard to understand exactly what you are spending in security because it's not completely contained within itself. It has many different tentacles, and some of the spend is in IT, some of the spend is in actual your security program, some of the spend can be in the business operating units around there. So that's not unusual at all. What I like to tell people is, you know, if you are unsure, right, then, you know, try and figure out what that spend is, because it's really important. Not to determine whether you're spending the right amount of money or not, right? It's just so you can understand, hey, where am I investing dollars that are coming off my bottom line to protect myself, and am I getting value out of that, right? That's really what we try and get to when we talk to people about the security and the budgets that they have on it. Awesome. All right. So we'll start with a little bit of the current state of what's going on out there, which I'm sure you all have heard the news many, many times over. You know, the pandemic really threw a twist at everybody. However, just think about this. It didn't throw a twist at the bad guys because they've always been remote, right? So they're the ones that are sitting there going, wonderful, we know how this works, and everyone is scrambling, so let's up our game. And that's exactly what they've done. We don't see that stopping by any means. Just give you an example, we provide incident response services, but we don't sit on insurance panels, right? So it's not a strategic service for us. We do it because our clients want us to, and they ask us to help them when they need that help. I haven't seen as many IR projects in the last 15 months as I've seen over the last 5 years. And that trend is increasing. Almost every week we're on the phone with clients who are getting hit with ransomware or some other type of a business email compromise. We'll talk more about that. So, you know, over the last 5 and 6 years too, if you look back, it was a lot around information security, which was a lot of manual processes, right, that we were following, trying to get, you know, our best posture in place around managing like identity, you know, laptop management and so forth. But over the last 5, 6 years, a lot of tech has come into play, including you know, artificial intelligence, which we'll talk more about. So believe it or not, artificial intelligence is a big player now in the cybersecurity domain, and it's needed. The one thing that I'll point out here, I look at this one where it says 39% cite cyber attacks as their number 1 digital threat. I go, well, they're about 61% off from being, you know, the right answer. It's really, you know, it is 100%. There's no question about it. And I think, you know, what gets confused here is a lot of people go, well, that, you know, they're thinking external, and we go, yeah, external and internal, right? The internal threats, there are a lot of statistics around internal threats being almost as much as external threats. Now, an internal threat can be as simple as somebody making a mistake, or it can be something that's that they actually are a threat actor inside. They want to either steal money or steal intellectual property or whatever it happens to be. So I look at it and go, you know, cyber attacks is the number 1, because why? We are, you know, companies are running towards digital transformation, right? Look at what pandemic did. It made everyone go remote, They had to change their approach. They had to put new technology in. They were running to the cloud. All these things were happening in the last 12 to 15 months. And yet they were doing it at a pace where they really weren't paying attention to security, protecting themselves, protecting the data, and those types of things. And as a result of it, the actors have taken advantage of those weaknesses. So what you see here are the, I'd say, top four. Ransomware is actually number one, without question. It's, there's a blog that I follow around the, ransomware attacks on a monthly basis globally. And it's amazing, and we'll talk more about this, but it's not just big companies, it's small companies, it's counties, it's little police departments. So it's amazing what's going out there with the ransomware attacks. And the other thing that we see trending is the IoT and OT. So if you're in manufacturing and distribution, they used to be air gapped. So the technology that was running the manufacturing and so forth was completely separate from corporate. Those two are merging, right? And because there's a lot of intelligence, business intelligence that they want to get out of it, driving automation, more efficiency, artificial intelligence into the operation. So they're merging, and that's creating security gaps because the OT side of it, IoT side of it, was kind of protected a little bit better before because they were air gapped, didn't really have external connections in there. But just ransomware in general is happening, and the amount of ransomware payments, right? So what we don't know is how many people are just paying versus how many people are prepared and actually dealing with it. What I find, really interesting, I guess concerning at the same time, is, when I'm reading like what's happening this month, that last month, and so forth, it's amazing to me how many companies are getting hit multiple times, right? Which tells me that they got hit once. And did they just pay it off and go away, or did they actually improve their security posture because they got hit again at the same time? So ransomware definitely is, the number one attack out there. However, we're also seeing the increase in social engineered spear phishing attacks. Fake websites to sell protective equipment. Believe it or not, I think the number of COVID domain sites is like off the charts since the pandemic started, right? So they're putting up fake sites. They're trying to sell fake equipment and so forth, and all it's doing is pulling people in. It's getting their information, and then boom, they're either stealing their money or a ransomware attack's coming out of that. So there's been a big increase due to the pandemic, specifically that they took advantage of the pandemic and the people's our desperate need for this type of equipment and so forth. And unfortunately, they were successful at it. The business email compromise and impersonation scams. If you don't know what that is, that's when they somehow either compromise the ID, the email, or they write an email in a way that looks like it came from someone and in the email they're saying, well, hey, listen, we're going to change the account number for this payment from A to B. Just go make sure that happens. And you'd be surprised how many people just actually read it, don't realize that it's a scam, and they actually change the accounting, they change the routing numbers, and the payment's out the door and gone. Sometimes they're lucky they can get it back, sometimes they're not. And some of them can be significant. I had a family office that actually, it was about $50,000 that they wired out, and they couldn't get it back right at the end of the day. So that one is also growing, and we'll talk more about all these, and kind of again the spend on those, and why aren't we getting better at blocking these things, or why where to invest the money to get better at blocking these things. And the last one, the supply chains, right? We obviously, with Colonial Pipeline. That's probably the best example, along with Splunk, what happened there in the actors gaining access to the supply chains. For companies that aren't in manufacturing and distribution for so forth, supply chains can be your third-party vendors that you're using, right? So they're supplying services to you, whether it's in IT or elsewhere. It could be a SaaS provider for an HR system, right? If they're attacked, right, then you can be compromised as well. So you have to think of supply chain in context of your business and what that means and how you're protecting yourself when you're using third parties. If you're not in manufacturing distribution, we can certainly talk more about that.
Hey, Michael, I have a question that might be relevant at this point. The question I've always had, and I think some others have shared, is that the overall problem is so overwhelming. You know, it's the cybersecurity is a moment you open your door till the next moment you open your door, because everything happens overnight as well. And so it's such a big issue that people think they could just throw some money or controls at it and just let it stop. You know, oh, I bought the lock for the door, it's okay, kind of thing, right? And as well, the employee, the variable of the employees, like not be compliant or not even knowing that they're not being compliant. So no matter how much you educate them, you've got to continually educate them. That has led to a seemingly safe feeling for some, and then until they get attacked, right? And is that what you're finding in some of the clients, or is it just that there's everything they're doing, but it's being beaten by these, you know, more talented cyber people?
So that's a great question. Let's start with the people part of it, right? I always look at it and say that's the weakest link in your chain. It always is. And again, most of the issues come from people just making mistakes, not paying attention, and the sophistication of the actors in their emails and their phishing campaigns and so forth has significantly increased. There's, you know, everyone asks me, well, what can we do about that? And I go, well, the only thing you can do about that is, one, continuously educate and make your people aware. Now, the awareness side is the key to me, right? The education you have to do, but the awareness side is, do you have things in place to understand threats, current threats, you know, that potentially out there? Like if there is a phishing email, do you people have a way to say, hey, this looks fishy, right? And report it, and then blast out messaging to all the people saying, need to make you aware, this is out there, do not click this link. And then, you know, IT and security are back there trying to block it and fix it, right? So the awareness piece is the part that I find that people lack the most, and because they think it's, you know, oh, awareness is they kind of confuse it with the education piece. So the awareness piece is the constant. What's happening today is something going on out there today, and we need to let our people know what's happening, right? So that they can be aware and they can be on their toes more when they're looking at emails, right? So that's one thing you can do. And then the other parts on that are just the increase and enhancements in the technology and tools that are available. And it's not just one thing, right? So it's multiple areas, right? From if you're an O365, right, as an example, which I would suspect a lot of you are, is it configured correctly to identify and block phishing attacks, right? Do you have monitoring going on to detect that there's an anomaly out there? Is there threat hunting going on? All those things are different parts and pieces that literally 3 years ago, we really didn't have them well defined. We have them more well defined today. So what we look at there is saying, and that's, you know, that's the point. People are like, I keep spending money, I'm putting controls in place. We're like, yeah, but how are you spending that money, right? And where are you spending that money? Because there's been a shift in how security is looking at how to protect better than it did just 3 years ago, right? And a lot of people are still acting like they were 3 years ago, right? And saying, hey, I got policy, procedures, and controls in place, I should be okay. And the answer, well, you're definitely in better position than not having those things in place. But have you shifted your posture to take advantage of the advancements in security technology and tools that you may actually have because of your licensing, and you don't even know it, and you're not even using it, right? Did I answer the question there, Manny? Okay.
Hey, Michael, it's Tom Embry. One of the things you said before, I think, is really, really important in addition to those 2 points, which is knowing your supplier landscape and keeping your employees as part of that awareness program, not only what they're doing with their internal tools, but what are their partners and their business partners, introducing that into the discussions when you enter into a contract, enter in, your supply chain, as you mentioned. I think that's another thing that is evolving now as a real threat, right? Because they're not under your control directly.
Right.
And yeah, so.
I mean, again, Splunk is a great example of that, right? Splunk was one of the most advanced attacks I've ever seen, right? And it was designed beautifully in how they did it. They compromised the development areas, right? They moved stuff into production, then they went back to the development areas and cleaned it all up so no one would see anything there, right? And next thing you know, boom, they're promoting everything out to all their clients, and everyone's getting hit left and right. We were quite busy there for a while when that happened. But the point you're making is absolutely spot on. We always look at, no matter what kind of provider they are, service provider, or whatever flavor they are in your supply chain of providing services or products to you, what does the contract say? What are the terms in there that are giving you the right to either right to audit, or for them to provide a SOC 2 Type 2 report every year to you? There's only so much you can do. However, we are seeing people are partnering more, that they're kind of opening themselves up a little bit more to so that they give you more confidence. You can understand a little bit better what they're doing. I think what everyone's learning is, and we saw the same thing in anti-money laundering. So the same kind of trend is happening here. In AML, banks couldn't talk to each other, right? They would look at it and say, hey, we definitely have something, funny going on here, but they couldn't reach out to the other bank and say, hey, you need to look at this. Now they can. Same thing's kind of happening here with supply chain. Everyone's realizing, you know what, we're in this together, right? We're not in this by ourselves. So we're going to be a little bit more open about how we're doing this and making sure, you understand what we do, and we want to understand what you do. Trust me, if you're, simply getting, using an HR SaaS system, right? They're as concerned about what your security is as you are about what their security is, right? So again, the contracts come down to it, and asking for things like SOC 2 reports, understanding, are they aligned to a particular security framework like ISO or NIST, and so forth and so on. I mean, that's sort of like basic stuff you want to do there. And then what you have to take on in your own environment is what we call zero trust. So even though you go, they're a trusted vendor of ours or supplying service, however, at the IT level, I'm not trusting them. So everything that's going back and forth between them, I'm checking, double checking to validate that it's actually them that I'm speaking to. So there's advancements in the security side of it as well, of how people are connecting and working together. And zero trust architecture and zero trust strategy is a big play today out there. And again, if you are Microsoft based, they are heavily investing in that whole strategy and architecture with all the products and platforms. So I definitely recommend, letting your IT people, make sure that they are looking at that, and that they are taking on a zero trust approach in their security posture of what you're doing. Makes a big difference. Great question. Anyone else before we get to the next survey? All right. Sorry, you might hear my dog barking in the background. It's one of the benefits working remote, right? All right, Sarah, can we run the second survey? Okay. It's good to see this number up here. It's we'll talk about a little bit more why we asked this question. Okay. So a few stats out here, right? Data breach metrics. And just think about it, right? If 52% are caused by malicious or criminal attacks, that means 48% are caused by mistakes, right? You got to get to 100% somehow. You see the rise and increase of a data breach. Now, with the cost of a data breach is, hey, I lost revenue. I was down for 5 days, so my revenue streams were impacted. I lost equipment. All right, I had to do notifications. I have to pay for monitoring services now. So that all goes into the cost of a breach, right? What we try and focus on is, hey, let's not have a breach, or if we have one, let's find it fast and contain it so that its impact is minimal to you. Another interesting point is, we're coming, hopefully, out of the pandemic, and we're in a different world now, where people are actually saying, I'm not so sure I want to commute and go to an office every day. And some companies are saying you have to, and some companies are saying, all right, maybe you don't have to. Let's figure out a new model going forward, where that just puts more emphasis on, okay, you got to make sure that this entire infrastructure that you have supporting whatever model you have is adaptable and has adapted to the new model of threats out there. The interesting point there, you could see in just between Q4 2019 and Q3 of 2020, so less than a year, the average ransomware payout went from 84 to 233,000. Now, why is that? Quite simply, when you're successful, what do? You increase the price. That's all they're doing. They're sitting there going, wow, their attack landscape has changed, right? And this is really important. We'll touch on some of those points in a second. It's a really important point of looking at it saying, well, why did this increase? Now, this is the spend, right? IT budgets are increasing. People are buying new products. They're increasing their staff. That translates to the same thing. People are increasing their spend in security products, and the number of security staff. So companies aren't sitting around. You're not sitting there going, well, we're not going to do anything about this. You're saying, okay, fine, let's invest. And it is increasing. However, right, what we just talked about is, yeah, but we're seeing just unprecedented attacks happening out there. And some of it comes down to, are you playing catch up, right? So, in the past, in your investments in security, have they been moderate, modest, and you just thought, hey, we're not on the radar, we're not big enough, and so forth. Some of it is part of that, and some of it is just a realization that the threats have evolved. They're more sophisticated. There's new tech and tools that are out there, and you have to stay current, right? You have to be agile about that.
Hey, Michael, you had a survey earlier. What is there an average you're seeing companies directing their IT budgets towards security?
Yeah, that's a great question. And no, I don't. I'm sure there are metrics out there. I see them, but I don't put much faith into that at all. There's not a number to say, hey, if you're spending 5%, you should be fine. I look at that and go, that's a false KPI to look at, right? So it's not, to me, it's not it's a matter of, what the percent is. It's the fact of, one, you are investing, and then two, how are you prioritizing that investment, right? What are you investing in? That's the real key. Are you investing in the right thing? So there's not a number. What I would tell you is we are seeing a clear trend that companies are realizing to keep pace, to do this, to do it the best way possible. It's really hard to do it yourself, It's really, really hard to find the talent. It's hard to get things in place. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to do all those things. So we're seeing investments shift towards managed services. So managed security services have been a big trend. And that's because companies can, those companies specialize in, those types of services, finding talent, keeping the talent, the solutions behind it, and so forth and so on. So I would look at it and say, don't look at, understand how much you are, but then really ask yourself, what am I spending that on? Am I spending it the best way? I've seen people say, hey, I've got, good amount of money I'm buying. I'm buying products left and right. And half those products aren't even implemented or implemented the best way, right? So their IT people are spending money on it, but they're not spending it in a strategic way and actually implementing it in a way that really improves your security posture. So it can be a false KPI if you kind of rely on that. The reason we ask the question is because it's the awareness thing of saying where, how much are you spending and where are you spending that money, right? And let's look at that. That's the real key there. That makes sense?
Yep, thank you. And I see you going towards risk management. My other question had to do with cyber security insurance. And I don't know if you can touch on that at all, but.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. We could absolutely talk about that. So the cyber insurance, everyone should have cyber insurance, right? Everybody, you should all have a policy. And the key is, again, figuring out what the right policy is that you should have, right? And that depends on who you are, what your threat profile is, what are you doing from a security perspective, what kind of scenarios have you built to understand if I was attacked, what would the impact be? And so you want to get the right policy in place. So generally speaking, cyber insurance, I always recommend people to have. But then I also say, tell them, listen, you need to look at it the right way and make sure you have an appropriate policy for you, right? The cyber insurance is if there is an incident, and with the amount of attacks we're seeing out there, I always look at it as it's not a matter of if, it's just when, right? Cyber insurance can help you kind of get through that. They can help you remediate it, eradicate it, contain it, get rid of it, remediate, recover, covering all the cost of doing that, the monitoring cost, notification cost, and also if there is business impact, right? Revenue, actual revenue loss and so forth. Some policies actually get into that as well. So if you don't have it, look into it. If you do have it, then I would highly recommend that you work with somebody that's someone that understands that whole the whole policy thing, to make sure that you have an appropriate policy in place. And that's working with the security people, but there's also people that actually, we have a group of people that specialize in that, right? Working with companies to look at what they have, making sure that they go, you have it, your policy is appropriate for who you are and the types of threats and scenarios of impact that you can have. Is there any other particular question around that?
Yeah, there's one thing I think that happens, and I don't know if it's generally accepted by the public or maybe I'm just unaware of it. But so if a major corporation gets hacked and they get my email address or my contact information, even deeper than email, and they steal my identity, whoever did that to the company now steals my identity, what recourse do I have against that company that, hey, you guys didn't protect me from my information, other than like a class action suit, but more so like now I've got real damage. What do I do? And how does insurance help that company cover that if they cover it at all?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can answer all of that, of what you can do. What the company is supposed to do at that point is pay for monitoring services. So they're looking for identity theft for you, right? And if there is an issue, then that's, that whole monitoring and identity, protection monitoring steps in, and they're paying for all of that at that point.
I bring it up because I think it happens, and we as the general public just accept that it happened, right? And unless we suffer a significant loss, I've had friends who have, significant assets been attacked because of a breach that the company had, and they were lucky enough to protect it at the time. But what if they hadn't? What if they lost $500,000 out of some investment account? I don't know what the legal recourse is, nor do I think, and I'm pretty sure the insurance policy doesn't cover that company helping remediate to you.
Yeah.
The problem there is, Manny, and it's a great point. And, as Michael said, that most companies offer the monitoring service. It's hard to make the connection between the breach and anything that may happen to you. If somebody loses your credit card information and then there's transactions on the credit card, well, I guess you're probably not responsible for those anyhow. So I don't know if you get damaged that way, but if somebody compromises your identity and all of a sudden you have major problems and people filing tax returns and that kind of thing, I mean, that could be a major issue and headache that you have to deal with. I just don't know how they make the connection between a specific breach and the issues that you have.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that. There have been so many breaches of large companies with our information being taken. I know for a fact my information is out on the dark web, without question. Right? I had to deal with people filing false unemployment claims in different states using my credentials, my personal information. It's really, I look at it and say, well, I don't know what the recourse is. I don't know. I don't think there is going to be a recourse. I think that the only thing I look at is what can I do about it, right? How am I protecting myself? There are a couple of things that I do personally, right, that I always recommend to people. And one of the best ones is go to the credit bureaus and put a security freeze on, right? That security freeze sits there and says, no one can attempt open credit in your name because there's a freeze. They'll automatically shut it down. And if you think about it, right, you sit there and go, well, how many times have I opened up a line of credit? Not many, right? So, it's not hard for me to go in and unfreeze it when I need to and then freeze it again. I could tell you over the last 12 months, I've had 3 or 4 incidents of where it blocked, people that have my PII trying to open credit in my name. So that's a little tactic. You can also call, for that, you have to go to each credit bureau, set up an ID. It's all free. Set up an ID, you go in and boom, you just put a freeze on it. The other thing you can do is put a fraud alert on. If you feel your information has been compromised, a fraud alert, you just call one of them, they call the other ones. A fraud alert simply means if someone is attempting to open any type of credit in your name, that the person that they're trying to open it with, the company, bank, or whatever, has to take extra steps to validate who you are, right? So I have both those things running on that to kind of protect myself on that. Outside of that, Norton identity protection, identity theft, and so forth. That's a great one to look at. So it's really unfortunate. It's a great point, but it's really unfortunate. It puts every individual in a position of saying, I have to figure out how to take care of myself. And yet there's no good guidance. No one's out there saying, hey, do A, B, C, D, and E, right? So that's what I always tell my clients, especially when I'm dealing with family offices and so forth. I'm like, hey, do this, do that, do this. That's sort of the protection you can put in place. So, great question. I wish there was a better answer for it. Any other questions on insurance or anything like that? Awesome. Okay. Well, so I think we went over this pretty well. This is just kind of the trends that we're seeing out there. This last one, again, the exploitation of supply chain networks in the last 12 to 18 months, that's the new one. So that's the one that the bad actors are, really excited about, right? So we're watching that one very closely, and there's a lot of activity around protecting supply chains. Because you can see what happens when a supply chain is actually, breached and attacked. All right. let's do another survey.
Michael, just one thing to bring up while you're talking about this survey. Some people think that by hiring a third-party security service, that that's all they have to do. I always stress to the clients I speak to about it is you need to have your infrastructure protected as well, and you need to have a point person on staff that works with the group. You can't just have them report into the CFO or the CEO and think it's covered. You need somebody who's daily monitoring your activity from your inside as well. What is your point of view on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right. A lot of people think, hey, if I hire someone to do monitoring, I'm good, right? And the answer is that's a great thing you put in place, but you need someone to know what they're doing, what they're finding, any actions you need to take, because a lot of times the actions that monitoring detection finds flip right back to the client saying, you really need to go change that and shut that down or reconfigure that because we're seeing attack going against that one asset that's on your network. So 100% agree. The use of third parties is increasing again for a lot of great reasons because it's so hard for companies to find people themselves, but you always have to have someone that's responsible internally, even if you've outsourced everything, right? Infrastructure is managed service, security is managed service, everything I've managed service. Well, okay, well, who's managing them? Who's looking at what they're doing? Who's getting the reports? And making sure that the right things are actually happening there. So it's a great point and absolutely 100%. It's also a great question because with people going to the cloud, there's a misconception that, hey, I'm in Microsoft Azure or I'm in AWS, I'm covered. Those guys got it covered. I go, yeah, they have a shared security model. They only go so far and they do really well at what they do. You're still responsible for your data. You're still responsible for access. You're still responsible for this. You're still responsible for that. And a lot of people just don't understand that. And then they don't set it up correctly and they're wide open. And then they're blaming the cloud. We go, no, it's not the cloud. You didn't understand, how to set up your part of the shared responsibility and what you're doing to manage and monitor the use of that infrastructure. So this is good. And so on the yeses, anyone that's a yes, like what kind of monitoring are you actually doing? Is it a managed detection and response type service? Or is it just a SOC type service? Anyone, willing to, not give the details, just the type of monitoring that's going on? And that's okay if you don't.
For us,
Sorry.
it's managed detection.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. And for the nose, as long as you have the things in place that this type of service and solution is providing, all good. All right.
Michael, knowing a bunch of the people on the call here, I think the managed security service that you brought up before, a lot of the companies represented here, don't have the luxury of a focused person or department, right?
Right.
I'd be curious to hear more about where that industry is heading, how mature it is. Are there players that are emerging, as front runners there? How do you find out more about entering into an agreement with one of them? And how do you, as you said, really important, how do you manage the governance of that agreement and make sure you're getting what you're supposed to get. I know there's a lot. I said a lot just now, but I guess, how would one go about finding that, because monitoring is just one part of it, as we just said, right?
Yeah.
Are these companies coming in and doing end-to-end security as a service, if you will?
So there's different types of managed security services. Managed detection and response is one of those, right? And that one is the one that is trending, is just off the charts because, as quite frankly, as you said, a lot of companies, it's hard for them to put in place those tools and technology, and more importantly, the intellectual property that goes behind it themselves. That's the real key. The intellectual property. There's a lot of tools and tech, all great stuff. It's what have they designed to go out there on the monitoring detection side, right? That's a big one. The biggest piece of that is the R, right? That wasn't there a few years ago. The R is there now, which means when something is detected, right, and declared an incident, they're not sitting there going, "Hey, you got a problem." They're jumping on it. Incident response kicks in at that point in time. So they're containing it, they're isolating things, and they're minimizing the damage, right? So the managed detection and response does all three of those things. They're setting it up and they're looking at all the things that are happening. They have intellectual property. That can be done in multiple ways. Their expertise and experience, and they develop what we call the rules, right? The content, the things that they're looking for. But then there's also things like MITRE ATT&CK, right? Which has all these types of attacks defined that they translate into the rules themselves and are looking for those essentially fingerprints of things happening out there. The other services that come with that are important are threat hunting and threat intelligence, right? So they're getting feeds from threat intelligence and they're passing that to you. It goes back to the awareness. Hey, this is going on. This is an attack out there. Let your people know what's happening. The threat hunting is where they're going, yep, we're monitoring everything. However, we're going to go out and just look on your network, look for some fingerprints out there because we know they're really good at hiding and moving laterally and avoiding the detection. All right, I brought up anti-money laundering earlier because it's the same type of thing. They're it's bad behavior that's masked as good things happening. Just a normal activity happening. This file moved over there. Wrong kind of file, right? Because we looked at the file, that movement, we determined, hey, that was kind of a weird move, number one. Then we looked at the file and we said, fingerprint, we don't like that isolated, right? We got an incident going on. So it's not just the monitoring piece, it's the threat intelligence, threat hunting piece that you have to have. And then the most important part is the R. Now, the R is where it gets tricky, right? We're an audit, tax and advisory firm, right? So we have to follow AICPA rules, right? Which means we can't make decisions for you, right? And if there's an incident, decisions have to be made on what to do, right? So the way that we set it up, and this is the way that I would care less if you have to follow AICPA or not. I would expect the vendor to say, hey, where's your incident response plan with all these things defined so that I know exactly what action to take, right? A lot of times you don't have that stuff. Well, the vendor should help put that in place. They can say, okay, well, here's what we're looking for, and here's what we would do if we found A, B, and C. So let's just make sure it's in your plan. And you're going to give us the authority through the contract to say, if this happens, you don't need to contact us, just follow our IR plan, right? And that means they can automatically jump in and start doing what they need to do. So that's a really important part, is the R part, understanding what do they do? Because there are some services that will just alert you. Their response is, we're going to let you know that you got a problem. I go, by the time you get a hold of someone, now it permeates throughout it. So what I suggest is, if you're looking at this type of services, which are out there, and any size company, if you have, let's say, 100 assets Now assets means I got 100 people, which means I have 100 laptops, or I got 50 servers, 50 people, whatever adds up to 100 or more. There are a lot of services that are very reasonably priced, right, to provide that type of service for you. But when you're looking at it, that's a differentiator. What do they do? What do they do for R? What are they detecting? What's their intellectual property? What are they looking for, right? How well suited are they? Understanding the underlying tech stack for their solution. When we talk, when we're out there talking to clients that are looking at it, when you get to IT people, they're interested in that. But I look at it and go, that doesn't matter, right? Because they're all great. There's so many great products out there. It's just, how do we put it together, and how are we using that to say it's a great service, right? So, so that's MDR, right? The other managed services that you can have there's vulnerability management, right? Being able to, on a regular basis, scan and find gaps and issues in the infrastructure and network, and then being able to taking the action to go correct them, like a port's open that shouldn't be open on a firewall. That needs to go get corrected. So the vulnerability management is out there. Cloud security, right? If you're in the cloud, you can have people monitoring and managing the cloud security for you. So there's a lot of different types of services that go out there. But to me, I always look at it and say, MDR is probably your best bet right up front. That's going to cover a lot of ground for you. And it's not just putting the locks on the doors. It's saying, hey, the alarm goes off, and I got people, jumping in to take care of the problem. So that's, hopefully that all made sense. I know I just rambled on there for a while. So did I answer the question number one? And any other related questions to that?
It was a bit of a ramble question, so thank you for the answer.
No problem.
Yeah.
As we've talked a lot about this, right? The one thing I want to point out is size doesn't matter. And this is a big difference. So I was just reading a recent report. Verizon puts out a security report every year, and they do a really good job of it. And what the key stat that caught my attention was the number of attacks on small and medium businesses is almost equal now to the number of attacks on large businesses. Whereas before, they weren't really even on the radar. So within the last 12 to 15 months, that number has jumped, which means everybody is being attacked. It doesn't matter how small or large you are. It could be a small township, it could be a local police department, could be, I've read one where there was a synagogue in New Jersey that got attacked for ransomware. So it doesn't matter what size you are. You've got to, do whatever you can, the best way you can, as strategically as you can, protect yourself. And protecting yourself also means realizing that actually looking at it from a lens of, I'm going to get attacked. So how am I prepared to take care of that? Ransomware attack. What if we get hit with ransomware? What do we do, right? A lot of people will go, well, maybe we just pay it. And I go, that's not a good idea, because the actors today, in the past, it was just a quick buck. Today, it's the way in, right? Can't tell you how many times, again, I'm seeing companies get hit multiple times with ransomware because they didn't clean it up right? And they must have paid, and they said it went away and we're all good. So if you get a ransomware attack, what are you going to do to kind of recover in the smallest amount of time? And this is another great stat. The average time to detect a breach still around 280 days.
Wow.
Large companies, it is in, when you look at, I think I actually have this. Do I have this? Oops. Yep, there it is. Ooh, reducing the time. So you can see 228 days, sorry, not 280. The average time to contain a breach was 80 days. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of damage being done. The chart on the right, that's a small, medium sized companies in kind of where they, how many days, weeks, or months, right? You can see this balance right here. If you look at the larger companies, these are smaller and the days are longer. So they've actually are investing, and the stuff they're putting in place means they are finding out things, and hours increased, finding out things faster. and being able to react. That is the key, right? Speed is the key. Recognizing you got a problem, taking care of it, going back to, managed detection and response, right? Hey, we're monitoring. Whoa, we got an alert. Yep, that's a problem. What do we do about it?
So Michael, the insurance companies, they generally recommend paying the ransomware, don't they?
I can't answer that question. I do not know. I can certainly get an answer to that question from our guys that work with the insurance companies. I know the policies, I believe, cover ransomware payments.
Right.
Certainly, we don't. FBI doesn't. Everyone says don't pay them. And they say, well, what do? Well, increase your resilience. You have so many things available to you today. The use of the cloud, setting up the cloud the right way, can make you extremely resilient, right? So that, we have clients that, that have an attack, and within hours they're back up and running and no damage, right? Because the resiliency was there. They strategically said, we're going to get attacked, so let's figure out how to set ourselves up better for that. So I can't answer the question on that. If that's true, that's kind of disheartening, I guess, because all you're doing is encouraging them to do more. Two, unless you go in and you clean it up right, you can get hit again. And I've seen businesses go out of business because of ransomware payments. So that's a great point, kind of disturbing point too, I guess, from my perspective. So the things that are getting better, right? Automation, artificial intelligence, right? That's going back to the response side of it. Just a couple of years ago, it was manual. I needed people to do this, right? Now there's artificial intelligence and automation in the products and tools themselves of those services that they automatically take the action, right? So, an analyst isn't doing anything. They're just looking at it going, yep, right action was taken at the end of the day. So that, those types of things are, reducing this number to less days, but being it more in days, less in months, less in weeks, and more in hours. And we're trying to get down to this. This is the goal, minutes and seconds. And how do you do that? Not from hiring 1,000 people. It's from driving artificial intelligence and automation into the tools and tech that we do. And that's exactly what is happening.
Hey,
okay.
Michael, yeah, just let you know we're right up on the hour, so I don't know if there's more to your slide or not. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time that's on here.
Yep, this is let's skip the survey for now. Okay, I kind of touched on all these points, folks. And I think this will be distributed. And certainly if there's any questions or anything, you can feel free to reach out to me. So this kind of touches on kind of, what would I do? And I love this last point. It's kind of my view. If you only have $10 to invest, are you better off investing in MDR or risk assessments? Well, the answer is, it all depends, right? Where I'm at right now. But the key thought there is, understand what you're investing and look at it and say, am I investing it the best way possible to protect us, number one, and to be as resilient as possible, number two. All right, so I don't know if we have just a minute or two, if any other questions. I know there's a lot of questions asked, but I'd like to thank you all for attending today and listening to me ramble on here on things. And the questions were great. And I think, Sarah, the material will be sent out, right? This deck will be sent out to them.
Yeah, this information will be sent out. Just to make sure, does anyone have any questions for Michael? Okay.